How to create a bleed in Illustrator. So what exactly is a bleed? And basically it's artwork that extends to the trim. So if you have, say, an image or a box and it goes all the way to that trim edge. We talked about that with crop marks and that where's my paper being cut or trimmed. If we do extend artwork to that edge, then we have to bleed it off of the page, or we call it building a bleed. So if you look at this document here, this is the edge of an 8.5 by 11. And again, with my rulers up, I can do a right click here and turn these to inches so you can see this a little bit better and something that you can relate to. So if I were to print this document, and I'll double click on the hand tool here to show you what it looks like at its full view, it would need to have a bleed with this gray edge because I'm extending it right to the edge of the page, and when I professionally print this, there's a high likelihood that there could be a shift, something could happen that then I end up with my paper showing through, and it's really a bad situation if that happens just on one edge. So we need to create a bleed. And basically a bleed extends the cropped area by about 1/8 of an inch. So that's 0.125 inches, 0.125. So there are two methods that we can use to create a bleed. This situation would most likely use what we call an offset path command. We also can use a move command, which would extend the existing artwork off the art border, off the edge in a certain direction. So let's go ahead and create a bleed. First, I need to select the frame. So I'm going to use my selection tool and select this frame. Now remember, in Illustrator, we start with a document. If we want a colored background, we always have to create an object or a box and fill it. So that's what I did here. It's a box that's filled with gray. So in order to use the offset path command with the frame selected, I'm going to choose my object menu and I'm going to go to path. And in path, I'm going to look for the offset path. A dialog box will open and it will let me specify the amount of offset that I want. Again, I'm going to choose preview. I always like to see what is happening. So this is extending a little bit more than I need it. I want that 1/8 of an inch, 0.125. And I'm going to press tab. Don't press enter or it'll go ahead and accept it. Click OK and you'll go with it. So pressing tab is sort of a way that I can navigate to another input box here, which updates my preview. So here's the 1/8 of an inch, and that's exactly what I want. Why 1/8 of an inch? Why 0.125? It's something that's sort of standard in the design world, and it's thought as though that amount of space is enough if the printer during the trim process gets off a little bit. It's not going to be more than 1/8 of an inch. So if I click OK, now I have my bleed set and I'm done with this document. I can send it to be printed. Now the second method, I'm going to turn off this layer and turn on a second layer. So this layer is similar to a card. You can see I have my crop marks on. So if I were to get this professionally printed and I'd want my cards to be trimmed down, this red bar here, the lower portion of the card, would have to be trimmed. Let me open up or highlight this box here. This is the edge of the card. If I put a stroke on this, you'll be able to see exactly what's happening here. So this has to extend both in the to the right, the left, and to the bottom. So I could do an offset path. Let me just show you what will happen if I do path and offset. And again, it remembers my last settings, which I like. I'm going to preview here. Do you see how that grows in all directions? So in theory, I could do this, but then I have to move it down 1/8 of an inch to get my red bar to start where I want it to start. So I'm going to cancel that. So another way that I can do is I can do some sort of transformation, And I really am going to transform just an edge, because if I had everything selected, let's just do this for a moment. And I'm going to go to my object menu and I can do transform. Now remember, I can get to transform via a transform panel under the window menu. I also can see some of my transformations on my control bar at the top as well. But let's do this method. We're going to go to Object Menu, Transform, and now Move. Okay, and by default it remembered what was last set, and you can see it jumped over to the left. That's not what I want. I want this to move in a certain position. Let's choose to move it. Oops, we don't want my eye. I want to move it 0.125. Again, press tab to see what's going to happen. And see here now we're moving it to the left. And you can already see what's happening is that my whole bar is going to be moved. So this edge is good. This edge hasn't been relocated. This is bad because it moved it from my right edge completely over. That's not what we want. So I'm going to cancel this. Instead, using the direct selection tool, I'm going to directly select an edge. So clicking in the middle of nowhere to deselect, and I'm going to click the edge. So now when you click on an edge, there's really no way to know for certain that you have that edge selected. When I click on an anchor point, the anchor point darkens, but when I click on an edge, I really don't know, other than just attempting in trial and error, that I have that selected. So let's go to Object again, Transform, and Move. And look at something crazy going on here. Distance, let's do again 0.125. I'm going to press tab to preview it. Evidently I have some sort of a skew going on. My position here in my vertical has a number for some reason. I'm going to put 0 in that. Press tab again just to see. We still have an odd thing happening here. Okay, so evidently I have more than just the path selected because it's moving my points as well. Not what I wanted. Let's cancel that. Let's do this. Let's grab both this anchor, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key to select an additional anchor. So now I have these two bottoms, and let's try this one more time. Object, Transform, and Move. So again, something awkward. For whatever reason, it likes to remember these numbers. All right, so distance is 0.125, but we don't want to do it vertically. And again, I have some odd issue going on here. Let's do it this 0 as well, and just to see if we can get it reset. There we go. So distance, let's do 0.125. Let's see if we can't do it both in an there we go. For some odd reason, it's still moving it over. Not exactly what I wanted. But you can see how now we're getting it to move down, similar to what I want to have happen. Let's see if we can't try a different method. Let's go ahead and open up our window and go to Transform. This is our Transform panel, if you remember. And so here again we have our X and Y location, width and height. So you could potentially move it or add it in here a 0.125. So that would be in my width. I could extend my width here. Instead of the 3.5, I can do, and I believe you can do some mathematical equations here. There we go. So I just added a plus sign, and what it did is it extended it for me. It did that math for me. So this method seems to be maybe a little bit better for altering that. So the height, we have to be cautious here, and this is where I want to go back and select just that bottom path because we want to move just the bottom one. So a little bit more difficult. I'll tell you, some people will use their guides and they'll just go ahead and drag it themselves, which I just accidentally did there, clicking on this and extending that just down. So a couple of different ways that you can do it. Let's see if we can't increase this one as well. I think it's going to just move the whole thing down. Yep, see how that moved it down. So we want to deal with our height and our width. And I'm afraid in this one, we'll try it. 1, 2, 5, tab. So that one, of course, I had this linked. I had it linked. So then it grew it in both directions. So I need to unlink that and then go ahead and do the adding the point. 1, 2, 5. Okay, and you see what happened here? Because I had the whole thing selected, it grew it the whole way. And maybe it's best now here just to increase this Y location and get the whole thing moved. So you can see it's maybe not quite as simple as you would hope it would be, but by understanding how things are working, you can get it to go. So those are the ways that we can do a bleed. Just remember that whether you have it on inside of crop marks, or if you're dealing with an entire document such as this one, you want to go 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch out. If you don't design with a bleed, what you might want to do is make sure that all of your elements then are not designed to be to that edge. So the safety margin is to stay away from the margin, actually 1/8 of an inch. So if I didn't want this to bleed, I didn't want to pay because it does cost extra, I would then keep this gray bar within 1/8 of an inch inside of my page. So you know, if you don't want to bleed, then just kind of a reversal where you're keeping it inside of the trim. So that's a bleed in Illustrator.